I'd been running contract loads for Linden Transport out of Anchorage since the previous October. 5 months of keeping my head down and my logbook clean. The work was good enough, steady. I hauled whatever they told me to haul, and most of the time that meant drilling equipment, prefab modules, pallets of groceries headed to camps up on the slope. Nothing exotic, the kind of freight that showed up on manifests exactly the way it looked in real life. That suited me fine. I'm not the kind of guy who goes looking for stories. I'd done enough driving in the lower 48 to know that the runs where everything matches the paperwork are the ones that let you sleep at night. Alaska paid better and the routes were longer, but the principle was the same. You show up on time, you strap it down right. You don't ask questions that aren't about weight or dimensions or delivery windows. You get paid. You move on. Linden didn't care much about my previous gigs as long as my CDL was current and I could handle winter roads. I appreciated that. They ran a tight dispatch operation out of a low prefab building off Old Seward Highway, all whiteboard schedules and coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since morning even when you poured it at noon. Raven Knapp ran the board most days. She had a voice that came through the phone, flat and direct, no small talk, just origins and destinations and deadlines. I'd met her in person exactly twice. Both times she'd been wearing the same rectangular glasses and the same expression that said she had 12 other problems more urgent than me. I liked that too. Clean boundaries. Most of my February runs had been Anchorage to Fairbanks, Fairbanks to Prudhoe, back down empty or with a return load of pipe that needed inspection south. Routine stuff. Cold, but routine. I'd gotten used to the light coming back in thin slices, the highways empty except for other commercial traffic and the occasional tourist who'd miscalculated their vacation timing. The truck was a Freightliner Cascadia with a decent sleeper and heat that worked. I kept the cab the way I kept my logbook. No clutter, no distractions. So when Raven called me on the 23rd and pulled me off the schedule I'd been running for 3 weeks, I noticed. "I've got a rush pickup," she said, no greeting. "Headed north to Deadhorse, then back south to Gakona. You available?" I was parked outside a diner in Wasilla, finishing a mediocre burger and going over my fuel receipts. "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "Early." "How early?" 5. "You'll stage out of the yard here, head up the Dalton. Load's waiting at a ConocoPhillips facility outside Prudhoe. You pick it up, turn around, and bring it down to a site near Gakona." I did the math in my head. Anchorage to Deadhorse was something like 800 miles if you went straight up, most of it on the haul road. Rough in winter even when conditions were good. Then back down and east toward Gakona, which sat inland past the Matanuska Valley. That was another full day of driving, maybe more, depending on weather. "That's a long turnaround for a rush. What's the freight?" "Equipment, single pallet, secured load. Details at pickup." That was vague. But vague wasn't unusual in this line of work, especially when the client was oil and gas. They didn't like specifics floating around. "Weight? Under 1,000 pounds. It'll ride easy." "Pay?" She paused half a second. $6,500 flat, half up front, half on delivery confirmation." I stopped chewing. $6,500 for a 2-day run was nearly double my normal rate. Maybe more. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin and set down what was left of the burger. "That's high. It's a priority load." "For who?" "Client's private. You want it or not?" I wanted it. That kind of money would cover my rent for 2 months and then some. But the fact that she wasn't naming the client and wasn't explaining why the timeline mattered made my gut pull a little. Not hard, just enough to notice. "What's the delivery window?" "Pick up tomorrow, delivery by the 26th, end of day." 3 days. Tight, but doable if the road stayed clear and I didn't hit a closure on the Dalton. I'd done worse. "Hazmat?" "No." "Oversize?" "No, standard freight. You'll have documentation at the yard." I figured it was some kind of repair part, something that had failed at a research site and needed replacing fast enough that someone was willing to pay rush freight to skip air transport. Happens more than you'd think. Equipment breaks in the cold, and sometimes it's cheaper or faster to truck it than to coordinate a charter flight into a remote strip. Same-day money? First half hits your account tonight. Second half within 6 hours of confirmed delivery. That was faster than Lyndon usually moved on payables. I didn't love the gaps in what she wasn't saying, but I also didn't have a concrete reason to turn it down. The load wasn't hazmat, wasn't oversized, and the route was nothing I hadn't driven before. The pay was good. Really good. And Raven wasn't the type to waste time selling me on something if it wasn't legitimate work. "Yeah," I said. "I'll take it." "Good. Stage at the yard by 0500. I'll have the paperwork ready." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there for a minute looking at my phone. The diner had a jukebox in the corner playing something countrified and forgettable, and the guy 2 booths over was working on a stack of pancakes that looked like it could stop traffic. I pocketed the phone and went back to my burger, but it tasted a little like cardboard now. Probably it had the whole time. 6,500 was a lot. But I'd learned a long time ago that asking too many questions when the money was good mostly just got you pulled off the job and replaced with someone who'd keep their mouth shut. If the load was legitimate, and I had no reason to think it wasn't, then the pay was just a reflection of urgency and inconvenience. Rush fees, winter surcharge, remote delivery. It added up. I finished eating and drove back to my apartment in East Anchorage. 1 bedroom, decent heat, a parking spot that fit the truck. I kept my go bag packed and my cold weather gear staged by the door, so prep didn't take long. I set an alarm for 3:30 and went to bed. Didn't sleep great. That's normal before a long haul. My brain likes to run through checklists and contingencies when it should be shutting down. I kept thinking about the route, about turnaround time at Proto, about whether the Adigan Pass would be clear or if I'd hit wind. Eventually, I got a few hours. The alarm went off in the dark. I made coffee, showered, dressed in layers. Thermal base, flannel shirt, insulated Carhartt bibs, wool socks. I packed extra gloves and a spare headlamp. My phone showed 2 new notifications, a payment confirmation from Lyndon for $3,250 and a text from Raven with the yard address and a gate code. I grabbed my gear and headed out. The Lyndon yard was quiet at 5 in the morning, just a few overhead lights throwing long shadows across the gravel lot, a couple of trucks idling near the fuel island, and the dispatch building glowing pale yellow through its front windows. I parked and walked in. Raven was at her desk with a headset on and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Dispatcher." She saw me, held up one finger, finished whatever conversation she was having, then pulled the headset off. "Bell," she said. "Morning." She slid a folder across the desk. Bill of lading, route sheet, delivery contact. Load staged at ConocoPhillips Yard 7, about 12 miles west of Dead Horse off Spine Road. Security contact is Jasper Green. He'll meet you at the gate. I opened the folder. The bill of lading listed the freight as scientific equipment, environmental monitoring, and gave a weight of 840 pounds. Dimensions were standard pallet, no hazmat placard codes. The delivery address was listed as Harp Research Station, Gacona, AK, with a contact number and a name I didn't recognize. Harp still active? For some projects. Don't know the details. I'd heard of Harp. Most people in Alaska had. It was that big antenna array the government built back in the 90s to study the ionosphere or auroras or something. I remembered reading somewhere that they'd shut it down and handed it off to the University of Alaska a few years back. Guess they were still running experiments. This goes straight to the facility or to a staging point? Straight to the site. Contact names on the sheet. They'll be expecting you. I scanned the rest of the paperwork. Everything looked normal. Standard liability waiver, cold chain notice, signature blocks. Cold chain? Load's temperature sensitive. It's climate controlled in storage. Once it's on your truck, don't leave it sitting in extreme temp for more than 2 hours without checking it. That was a little unusual, but not unheard of. Some electronics didn't like deep cold. Monitored? No external tracker, just visual check. You'll see what I mean at pickup. I nodded and signed the waiver. She countersigned, tore off my copy and handed it back. Jasper's expecting you around 1600. Don't be late. Won't be. And Belle? She looked at me over her glasses. This one's need to know. Client wants it quiet. No photos, no posting, no talking about the cargo. You pick it up, you deliver it, you cash the check. Clear? Clear. I walked back out to the truck. The sky was still full dark, stars hard and bright overhead. I climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, let it warm while I programmed the GPS and rechecked my fuel. Then I rolled out onto the old Seward and pointed north. The drive to Deadhorse was long and cold, and exactly what I expected. I hit Fairbanks around noon, refueled, grabbed a sandwich, kept moving. The Dalton Highway was empty except for a couple of southbound oil trucks and one RV that had no business being up there in February. The road was compact snow and ice most of the way, rideable but not fast. I kept it steady, watched for caribou, and made decent time. I rolled into the Prudhoe industrial zone a little before 4 in the afternoon. The light was already going gray. Everything up there is gravel pads and modular buildings and steel pipe, all of it low and functional and painted in shades of white and beige that blend into the snow. I followed Spine Road west past a couple of active drill sites until I saw the chain-link fence and the lit guardhouse that marked Yard 7. I pulled up to the gate. A guy in a black parka and a ConocoPhillips badge stepped out of the guardhouse. Not someone I'd seen before. Older, maybe 50-something, with close-cropped gray hair and a face that didn't look interested in small talk. I rolled down the window. Cold air poured in. "Mark Bell," I said. "Linden Transport. I'm here for a pickup." He looked at me for a second, then down at a clipboard. "You're expected. I'm Jasper Green. Follow me in. Stay in your vehicle until I clear you to dismount." Not "nice to meet you." Not "how was the drive?" Just instructions. I rolled the window back up and followed him through the gate. The yard was bigger than I'd expected. Rows of storage containers and equipment cages lit by sodium vapor floods that turned everything the color of old paper. Jasper led me past 2 rows of containers to a standalone cage in the back corner. It was maybe 10 feet on a side, chain-link walls with a roof of corrugated metal, and inside I could see a single pallet wrapped in heavy black plastic. He stopped and motioned for me to pull up parallel. I did. He walked to my door, and I opened it. "Step down," he said. I climbed out. The cold bit through my layers immediately. Had to be 15 below, maybe colder with the wind. Jasper unlocked the cage and swung the door open. He didn't go inside, just stood there and pointed. "That's your load. Single pallet, secured cabinet, total weight 840. You'll strap it center mount in your box. No stacking, no secondary cargo." I walked closer. The pallet was standard wood, and sitting on top of it was a metal cabinet about the size of a mini fridge, wrapped tight in black plastic sheeting. Frost clung to the underside of the plastic in thin, feathery layers, like the thing inside was colder than the air around it. That was weird. "It's climate controlled?" I asked. "Was. It'll equalize once it's out of storage. You need to get it to Gakona before it warms past threshold." "What's threshold?" "Not your concern. Just don't leave it sitting in a heated space." I looked at him. His expression didn't move. "What's inside?" "Scientific equipment. That's all you need to know." I didn't love that answer. But the load was small, the pallet looked stable, and I'd signed the waiver already. I walked around it once. No leaks, no damage I could see. The plastic was taped down tight with heavy industrial strapping tape. How do I check it if something seems off? You don't. You deliver it sealed. If the plastic is breached or the straps are cut, you call the number on your contact sheet immediately. Do not open it. That pulled at my gut again. A little harder this time. Why? Jasper reached into his parka and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. "Read this, then sign the bottom." I unfolded it. It was a single page, printed in narrow black type on ConocoPhillips letterhead. The heading said, "Transport Protocol, Cargo Acknowledgement." Below that were 8 numbered lines. At the bottom was a signature line and a date field. I read it twice. Most of it was standard confidentiality stuff, the kind of thing you saw on high-value freight or proprietary tech. But anomalous behavior was a weird phrase. Equipment didn't behave. It worked or it didn't. "What kind of anomalies?" I asked. "Unlikely you'll see any. If you do, you'll know." "That's not an answer." Jasper's pale blue eyes stayed flat. "Sign it or don't. If you don't, I'll call Linden and they'll send someone else. You'll still get half your fee for the drive up here. Your choice." I stood there in the cold, holding the paper. $6,500, half of it already in my account. The load wasn't hazmat, wasn't oversized, wasn't illegal as far as I could tell. It was just weird, and weird wasn't the same as dangerous. Probably. I pulled a pen from my pocket and signed the bottom of the page. Jasper took it back, folded it, and tucked it into his parka. "Good," he said. "Back your truck up. I'll get the forklift." I climbed back into the cab and repositioned the Freightliner so the rear doors lined up with the cage. Jasper came back a minute later driving a propane lift. He maneuvered the forks under the pallet, raised it smooth, and loaded it into my trailer without a word. I watched from the side mirror. The pallet slid in clean, centered just like he'd said. The frost on the plastic glittered under the floodlights. Jasper climbed down from the lift and walked to the back of my trailer. I met him there. He pointed at the tie-down points. 4 straps minimum. Crossed pattern. Check them every 2 hours. Got it. He stepped back. I secured the straps, pulled them tight, checked the tension twice. The load didn't shift. When I was done, I closed the rear doors and locked them. Jasper handed me a small plastic card, the kind you'd use for a hotel key. "Gate pass. Gets you out of the yard. Leave it in the drop box at the guardhouse." I took it. "Anything else?" "Drive safe." He walked back toward the guardhouse without waiting for a reply. I stood there for a second in the cold, looking at the back of my trailer. Then I climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, and rolled toward the exit. I dropped the gate pass in the box and pulled out onto Spine Road. The rules were still folded in my wallet. I could feel them there, a small, stiff rectangle pressing against my thigh. I turned south and started driving. I left Yard 7 around 4:30 with a full tank and 2 large coffees from the guardhouse vending machine, the kind that taste burnt no matter when they were brewed. I dropped the gate pass in the box and pulled south onto Spine Road, watching the facility lights shrink in my mirrors. The rules were just overcautious security measures. That's what I told myself. Companies did this kind of thing all the time when they had proprietary tech or research equipment they didn't want copied or stolen. The confidentiality clause made sense. The no photos thing made sense. Even the bit about anomalous behavior probably just meant if the thing started leaking or smoking or whatever, call someone before it became a hazmat situation. I'd signed stricter NDAs for pharmaceutical runs. That's what I kept thinking as I merged onto the Dalton and pointed south toward Coldfoot. The sky was already going purple at the edges. Sunset came early this far north in February. I had maybe another 20 minutes of decent light, then it'd be full dark until morning. I cracked the first coffee, still hot enough to burn my tongue a little. The highway stretched out clean and empty ahead. No other headlights, no trucks coming north yet. Just me and about 400 miles of frozen nothing between here and Fairbanks. I tried to settle into it. The rhythm of the road, I mean. That's what long haul is mostly. Finding the groove where your body stops fighting the seat and the engine noise turns into white noise and the hours start clicking past without you really noticing them. I'd done this route enough times that I knew the landmarks by heart. The pipeline crossings, the creek bridges, the little turnouts where you could pull off if you needed to chain up or check your load. 2 hours down. Check the straps at the next pipeline overhead, maybe stretch my legs. The cargo protocol said every 2 hours, so that's what I'd do. The coffee was helping. I wasn't tired yet, but I wanted to stay ahead of it. I had the heat running steady and the CB on low, just static and the occasional pop of interference. Nobody else out here tonight, apparently. That was fine. I didn't need the company. I passed the first pipeline crossing around 6:15. Didn't stop. The straps would be fine for another hour, and I wanted to put more distance between me and Prudhoe before I pulled over anywhere. Don't know why. Just felt better to keep moving. The second crossing came up around 6:45. The pipeline ran overhead in this section. Big silver tube held up by those massive A-frame supports they use in permafrost zones. I slowed down a little coming under it. The road curved just past the supports, and there was always a chance of black ice in the shade. That's when I heard it. Tapping. Metal on metal. Steady, deliberate, coming from the trailer. I eased off the throttle and listened. Tap, tap, tap. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats again. It didn't sound like cargo shifting. Cargo shifts when you brake or turn or hit a bump. This was rhythmic, consistent. It kept going even when the road was straight and smooth. I checked my mirrors. Nothing but darkness behind me and the faint glow of my running lights on the pavement. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was the cage, metal pallet, temperature dropping outside. Things contract in the cold, joints settle. It was probably just the frame adjusting as the temperature equalized. Jasper said it would do that. The cargo had been climate-controlled in storage. Now it was sitting in a trailer at 15 below. Of course it was going to make noise. That made sense. I kept driving. The tapping continued for maybe another 10 minutes. Then it stopped. I didn't realize how tight my shoulders were until they weren't anymore. The CB had been quiet all night. Just the low hiss of static and the occasional click when I hit a spot with some atmospheric interference. I wasn't expecting anything else. Most drivers didn't run this stretch at night unless they had a reason, and the ones who did usually kept to themselves. So when it crackled to life around 7:30, I actually flinched. The voice came through clear. Too clear, no distortion, no breakup. It sounded close, right behind me, close. "Maddie," the voice said. "Maddie, sweetheart, I need you to pull over." My hands locked on the wheel. Nobody had called me that in 20 years. Not since I was a kid. Not since my mother was alive. "I'm so cold, Maddie. Please pull over. Just for a minute." It was her voice. Same cadence. Same soft drawl she had when she was trying to coax me into something. The way she used to say my name when I was scared of the dark or didn't want to go to school. I recognized it immediately. My foot started lifting off the throttle. Then I caught myself. I reached for the folder on the passenger seat, flipped it open with one hand. The route sheet was on top, but underneath it was the page Raven had printed for me back at the yard. The one with the bullet points. Do not respond to CB communication unless you initiate contact and verify the other party. I stared at the line. My hand was shaking. "Maddie, please, it's so cold." I turned the CB off. The cab went silent except for the engine and the road noise and my own breathing, which sounded too loud in my ears. 10 minutes. The protocol said to shut off communication for at least 10 minutes if anything anomalous occurred. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel. The center line kept drifting left in my peripheral vision, and I had to correct twice before I realized I was the one drifting, not the road. The rumble strip growled under my right tires. I jerked the wheel left, overcorrected. The truck swayed. I eased it back to center and made myself breathe slower. My mother had been dead for 18 years, heart attack in a Denny's parking lot in Sacramento. I got the call from my aunt while I was working a construction job in Reno. Didn't make it back in time for the service. That voice wasn't her. Couldn't be. I checked the clock on the dash. 7:33. I needed to keep the radio off until 7:43. The road stretched out straight and black ahead of me. My high beams caught the reflectors on the shoulder markers and nothing else. No other trucks, no buildings, no lights, except mine. I focused on keeping the truck centered, on watching the white line, on counting the pipeline supports as I passed them. 4 minutes. 5. The shaking in my hands started to ease up. 6 minutes. I thought about pulling over, checking the trailer, looking at whatever was making that tapping sound. Then I thought about the voice and decided I'd rather keep driving. 7 minutes. The rumble strip caught my tire again, and I corrected without thinking this time. Muscle memory kicking back in. 9 minutes. At 10, I reached for the CB and turned it back on. Static, just static. I waited, listened, watched the channel indicator to see if anyone was transmitting. Nothing. The emptiness should have been a relief. I know that. I should have been glad the voice was gone and it was just me and the road again, and whatever that was, it was over. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt like something had been testing the door and I'd only barely remembered to lock it in time. The highway kept stretching ahead. White line, yellow line, reflectors, dark. I had another 350 miles to Coldfoot, then another 250 to Fairbanks, then the cutoff to Gacona and the delivery point. The protocol sheet was still open on the passenger seat. The rules didn't feel theoretical anymore. They felt like the only thing between me and whatever was riding in the back of my truck. I pulled into Coldfoot around 9:45. The fuel station was lit up bright enough to hurt after 3 hours of highway darkness, and I parked at the diesel island farthest from the building. Force of habit. I filled the tanks first, watching the numbers climb, then locked the truck and headed inside. The bathroom was single occupancy with a space heater mounted to the wall. I washed my hands twice, splashed water on my face, stood there for maybe 30 seconds just letting the warmth soak in. My reflection looked normal, tired but normal. I figured that was something. The cafe was attached to the fuel station through a connecting door. I pushed through and got hit with the smell of fryer grease and burnt coffee and the classic rock station somebody had playing over mounted speakers. Fleetwood Mac. There were maybe 6 people scattered across the booths and counter stools, all of them in work gear or winter layers. Nobody looked up when I came in. I grabbed a booth near the back, dropped the protocol folder on the table, and ordered coffee and a burger from a server who looked about 20 and didn't ask for my name. She brought the coffee in under a minute. It was watery and too hot, and I drank half of it anyway. The noise helped. The music and the low conversation and the clatter from the kitchen all kind of blurred together into this wall of sound that made the last 3 hours feel distant. Unreal, maybe. I could almost convince myself the tapping had been road vibration and the voice had been some CB prankster with a frequency scanner and a sick sense of humor. People did that kind of thing. Not common, but not impossible. I was halfway through the burger when I noticed the trooper. He was sitting at the counter about 15 feet away, angled so he could see most of the room. Alaska State Trooper uniform, duty belt, winter hat set on the stool beside him. He was nursing a cup of coffee and watching me. Not staring, just watching. The kind of look cops give when they're deciding whether something's worth their time. I kept eating, didn't make eye contact, didn't look away, just kept my pace steady and worked on the fries. He stood up maybe 2 minutes later and walked over. "Evening," he said. "Evening." He nodded at the empty bench across from me. "Mind if I sit?" I gestured at the seat. He sat down, set his coffee on the table, folded his hands in front of him. Up close, I could see his nameplate. Parsons. Hazel eyes, clean-shaven, wind-reddened skin, maybe mid-30s. "Long haul?" he asked. "Prudhoe to Gacona." "That's a run." He glanced at the protocol folder, then back at me. You with Lyndon? Contract driver. He nodded slowly. What are you hauling? Scientific equipment. What kind? Bill says environmental monitoring. Cabinet, about 840 pounds. Parsons tilted his head. Mind if I see the paperwork? I didn't love it, but I didn't have a reason to refuse. I slid the folder across the table. He opened it and pulled out the bill of lading, scanned it without touching the other sheets, then set it down and tapped the freight description line with one finger. Cabinet, he said. That's what it says. You see what's inside? It was sealed when I picked it up. Where'd you pick it up? ConocoPhillips yard, outside Dead Horse. He looked at me for a beat, then slid the folder back across the table. You running straight through? Planning to. Weather Service says winds picking up overnight. 40, maybe 50-mile-per-hour gusts north of the Yukon River crossing. Could close the road if it gets worse. I'll keep an eye on it. Parsons picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it back down. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just looked at me. You seem steady, he said finally. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. He leaned back in the booth. I've been working this highway for 6 years, seen a lot of things that don't make sense up here. Folks driving alone who swear they heard voices. Guys who stop for hitchhikers who aren't there when they pull over. Equipment that acts up for no reason. He paused. Most of it's explainable. Cold, isolation, fatigue. Your brain fills in gaps. I nodded. But some of it isn't explainable, he said, and the smart ones don't try. I kept my face neutral. Okay. If you see anyone walking out there alone, Parsons said, you keep driving. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't even think about it. You understand? That one hit different. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Yeah, I said. I understand. He studied me for another moment, then stood up and picked his hat off the counter stool. Drive safe. Will do. He walked out through the connecting door without looking back. I sat there for maybe another minute, staring at the protocol folder on the table. The phrase anomalous behavior was still stuck in my head, but now it had company. If you see anyone walking out there alone, keep driving. That matched the rule sheet, word for word, basically. Protocol number 6, do not stop for pedestrians or stranded motorists without radio confirmation from dispatch. I hadn't thought much about it when I signed the form. Figured it was standard liability coverage. But Parsons didn't work for ConocoPhillips. He didn't know what was in my trailer. He shouldn't have known the protocols. I paid the check, left a 10 on the table, and walked back out to the truck. The first hour back on the road was quiet. I mean, actually quiet. No tapping, no voices, no CB weirdness. Just the engine and the tires and the occasional gust of wind hitting the trailer broadside. The highway was empty. I didn't pass a single vehicle heading north, and nobody overtook me heading south. I checked the straps at the pipeline crossing just past Coldfoot. Everything was tight. The pallet hadn't shifted. The black plastic wrap looked the same. I put my hand near the trailer floor and felt cold radiating off the cargo. But that could have been normal. It was 20 below outside. Back in the cab, I turned the CB on and flipped through the channels. Nothing but static. I left it on channel 19 and kept driving. Around 11:15, I started wondering if maybe I'd overreacted. The tapping could have been the frame settling. The voice could have been a prank or a malfunction. Parsons' warning could have been generic advice he gave every solo driver this time of year. I'd been awake since 3:30 and running on coffee and adrenaline. That messes with your head. I was almost convinced by the time I saw the aurora. It had been visible all night as a faint green glow on the northern horizon. Nothing unusual for February. But somewhere around 11:30, it started to brighten. The band stretched wider and started moving fast. rippling south across the sky in waves that pulsed and folded over themselves. Green, then pale yellow at the edges, then back to green. Bright enough to cast shadows on the snow. The highway looked different under it. Flatter, maybe. Emptier. The pipeline supports, and the snow berms, and the scattered spruce all looked like cutouts, two-dimensional, stripped of anything that made them real. I kept my speed steady and my eyes on the road, but I could feel the light shifting overhead. That's when the tapping started again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Faster than before. More insistent. The rhythm was tighter, sharper, and it didn't stop after 10 minutes. It just kept going. I didn't touch the brakes, didn't pull over. I locked my eyes on the center line and kept the throttle where it was. The aurora rippled overhead and the tapping kept going, and I pushed south through the empty corridor of highway with my hands tight on the wheel. Parsons had been right. The smart ones don't try to explain it. I knew the next test was coming soon. The figure appeared maybe 200 yards ahead on the right shoulder, just standing there, back to the road. I eased off the throttle without thinking. That's reflex. You see someone stranded in February at midnight on the Dalton. You start the process of stopping even if your brain hasn't caught up yet. Then I remembered Parsons. I pressed down harder. The engine noise climbed. The figure turned. That's when I saw it. The parka looked fine. Dark blue, maybe black. Hood up, cinched tight the way you do it when the wind's bad. Normal stance, normal height. But the face, it was pale, flat, wrong. Not like someone sick or frozen, like skin pulled tight over something that wasn't bone, something rigid. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they didn't sit right, didn't move. The whole face looked painted on a mask that was trying too hard to look human. The figure lifted its arm, slow, deliberate, pointed straight at my trailer. I didn't brake, didn't slow. I kept the pedal down and watched the figure grow in the windshield, then slide past on my right at 60 miles an hour. I looked at the side mirror. The figure was still there, same size, same distance. I was doing 60 and it wasn't getting smaller. It just stood there on the shoulder, arm still raised, keeping pace without moving its legs, without walking, without anything. I counted to 5, checked again, gone. Just empty road and snow berms lit green by the aurora. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, kept my speed steady. My chest felt tight, but I made myself breathe normal. In through the nose, out through the mouth. That's what they tell you. A mile later, I saw the second one. Same spot, right shoulder. Facing the road this time. Arm already raised. Pointing. I didn't slow, didn't touch the brake. I drove past and it did the same thing. Stayed the same size in the mirror for way too long, then blinked out. Third one came maybe half a mile after that. Then a fourth. They were spaced like mile markers. Like someone planted them there on purpose, each one standing motionless in the cold, arm up, finger extended toward my load. I stopped checking the mirrors. The tapping started again. Different this time. 3 quick hits, sharp, metal on metal, pause. 3 quick hits, pause. Same rhythm, over and over, steady and deliberate, not random, not thermal shift or vibration from the road. Intent. That's the word that came to me. The tapping had intent behind it. I kept driving. The aurora pulsed overhead in wide bands that stretched all the way across the sky now, rippling south in waves that made the snow look alive. The tapping kept going. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits, pause. It didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept repeating. Then I felt it, the urge. I should stop and check the chains. That thought dropped into my head, fully formed, calm, reasonable, practical. The straps might have loosened. The pallet could have shifted. I'd been driving for hours. It made sense to pull over, just for a minute, just to be safe. I actually started easing off the throttle. Then I caught myself. That wasn't my thought. I mean, it was in my head. Yeah. But it didn't come from me. It felt planted, dropped in from somewhere else. The tone was wrong. The timing was wrong. I don't pull over to check straps unless I hit a pothole or feel something shift. I checked them 90 minutes ago at cold foot. Nothing had changed. But the urge kept pressing, insistent, reasonable, calm. Just stop. Just check. Just look. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept my foot where it was. My phone was in the cup holder. I grabbed it without looking away from the road. 1 bar. I pulled up Raven's number and hit call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. 4 rings. 5. Voicemail picked up. Her voice clipped and professional. You've reached Raven Knapp at Linden Transport. Leave a message. I ended the call. Tried again. Same thing. Straight to voicemail after 5 rings. I pulled up the keypad and dialed 911. The call connected. I heard it ring. Once. The screen went black. Just died. No warning. No low battery alert. The display cut out completely. I hit the power button. Nothing. Held it down. Still nothing. The phone was dead. The truck still had power. Dash lights were on. Headlights working. Engine running smooth. But my phone was a black brick in my hand. I tossed it back in the cup holder. The dashboard clock blinked. I glanced at it. 11:47. It blinked again. 12:32. I stared. 45 minutes had just jumped forward, just vanished. I checked my watch, the analog one I wear because it doesn't need charging. 11:51. The dashboard clock blinked again, still said 12:32, then it reset. 11:51. Matched my watch now. I kept driving. What else was I going to do? The tapping continued. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits. The figures kept appearing, 1 every mile or so, always on the right, always pointing. I didn't look at them directly anymore, just kept my eyes on the center line and let them slide past in my peripheral vision. The thought came again. Turn around. Calm. Steady. Reasonable. This was a mistake. The job wasn't worth it. I could drive back to Coldfoot, park at the cafe, wait until morning, call Raven, and tell her I was done. She'd keep the first half of the payment. That was fine. That was fair. I'd be safe. The word sat in my head like a weight. Safe. And that scared me, because I felt calm about it. Genuinely calm. The idea of turning around didn't make me anxious or guilty or worried about the money. It just felt right. Obvious. Smart. Which meant it wasn't mine. I don't quit jobs. I've never quit a job. I've worked through broken ribs, through the flu, through 2 winters in Fairbanks before I had decent gear. I don't just turn around because things get weird. But this felt different. This felt easy. This felt like relief. And that's how I knew it was planted. The CB radio clicked. I hadn't touched it. Hadn't leaned against the dash. Hadn't hit a bump. It just clicked on. Static filled the cab. Low, steady, white noise. I stared at the radio. The volume knob turned by itself. Slow, deliberate. The static got louder. I reached for the power knob. The static cut out. A voice came through. Maddie. Same voice, same cadence. My hand froze halfway to the knob. Maddie, pull over. I'm cold. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The aurora rippled overhead. The tapping continued from the trailer. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits. The voice waited. The AM/FM radio clicked on. I didn't touch it. Hadn't touched it since I got in the truck at Yard 7. The CB was already running static, and that voice kept calling me Maddie. And now the FM decided to join in. It didn't fade in or warm up, just clicked on at full volume. A man's voice came through. Calm. Professional. The kind of voice you'd hear on public radio doing weather updates or traffic advisories. Attention northbound traffic on the Richardson Highway. Road closure in effect at milepost 227 due to avalanche hazard. All vehicles are advised to take the eastern bypass via Old Valdez Trail. Repeat, road closure at milepost 227. Detour via Old Valdez Trail. I wasn't on the Richardson yet. Still had another hour before I hit the junction south of Delta, and I knew the highways up here pretty well after 3 months of running loads. There was no eastern bypass. Old Valdez Trail was a historic route that hadn't been maintained in decades. You couldn't drive it in February. Probably couldn't drive it in July. The voice repeated the message. Same tone, same pacing, word for word. Then it said my name. Driver Bell, please acknowledge. My foot eased off the throttle. The voice waited. 5 seconds of dead air. Then it came back. Mark Bell, acknowledge road closure and confirm detour route. I reached for the power knob and twisted it off. The radio went silent. My hands were shaking a little. I set them back on the wheel and counted to 10 in my head, then pulled the protocol folder off the passenger seat with my right hand while steering with my left. I flipped it open. The pages were crumpled from being handled too many times already tonight. I found the line I was looking for. Protocol 6. Do not respond to any radio communication, CB, FM, AM, unless you initiate contact and verify the other party's identity. If unsolicited communication occurs, power off the device for a minimum of 10 minutes before resuming use. 10 minutes. Same rule as the CB. I checked the dashboard clock. 11:53. I turned it back on at 12:03. I set the folder back on the seat and kept driving. The aurora was still rippling overhead in those wide green bands that pulsed like something breathing. The road stretched out flat and empty under the headlights. No other vehicles. No lights anywhere except the truck in the sky. The tapping started again. Same pattern. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits, pause. Sharp, metal-on-metal sound coming from the trailer. I'd heard it twice already tonight, and both times I rationalized it or ignored it. This time felt different. I started counting in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The tapping matched me. I stopped counting. The tapping stopped. I waited 5 seconds, then started again. 1, 2, 3. 3 taps. Pause. 4, 5, 6. 3 taps. Pause. It was tracking me. Whatever was back there in that black-wrapped cabinet was listening to my thoughts or my breathing or the rhythm of my heartbeat, and it was tapping along like it knew exactly what I was thinking. I stopped counting and gripped the wheel tighter. The tapping continued. Same rhythm. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits, pause. Steady and deliberate and wrong. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't let myself think about it. 10 minutes. I just had to drive for 10 minutes and then I could turn the radio back on and it would be static or nothing or some actual station playing classic rock at midnight. The counting thing was a coincidence. Road vibration. Cargo settling. Thermal contraction. I'd signed a protocol sheet that mentioned anomalous behavior, but that didn't mean the thing could read my mind. I checked the clock. 11:56. 7 minutes left. I hit Paxson around 12:40. The tapping had stopped 5 minutes earlier, cutting out all at once like someone flipped a switch. The aurora was still going, but it had dimmed a little, pulling back from those wide bands into narrower ribbons that flickered instead of pulsed. I hadn't seen another figure on the shoulder since I turned the FM off. No voices on the CB. No new thoughts planted in my head telling me to stop or turn around. Just road and darkness and the hum of the engine. Paxson wasn't much. A lodge that closed for the winter, a couple of buildings I couldn't identify in the dark, and a dot maintenance area on the east side of the highway with a chain-link fence and a gravel lot full of plows and graders. The work lights were on. That's what made me pull in. bright white halogens mounted on poles, lighting up the whole lot like a construction site. Real light, electric light, the kind that didn't pulse or ripple or cast shadows that moved wrong. I slowed and turned into the access road, gravel crunching under the tires. There were 3 trucks parked near the building, 2 plow rigs with blades angled down and 1 smaller utility pickup. All of them looked normal, dirty and road salted, and real. I pulled the rig to a stop near the fence, about 50 feet from the building, and put it in park. Left the engine running. The work lights were bright enough I could see the whole lot, the building, the equipment. Everything looked solid, normal, like the world had gone back to making sense. I sat there for 30 seconds just breathing and letting my shoulders drop. Then I remembered I was supposed to check the straps every 2 hours, and I hadn't done it since Coldfoot. That was over 2 hours ago, probably closer to 3. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, zipped my parka all the way up, and opened the cab door. The cold hit me immediately. 20 below, maybe colder. The kind of cold that goes straight through your lungs and makes your teeth ache. I stepped down onto the gravel and shut the door behind me, then walked around the side of the trailer toward the rear. The work lights lit everything up pretty well, but I turned the flashlight on anyway. Clicked it twice to make sure it was working. Beam came out strong and white. I reached the back of the trailer and stopped. The black plastic wrap was bulging. Not a lot. Maybe 6 inches. But it was pressing outward from the center of the pallet, like something inside was pushing hard against the wrap, stretching it tight. The plastic was thick, industrial shipping grade, the kind you use to weatherproof freight, but it was bowed out in a smooth curve that hadn't been there when Jasper loaded it at yard 7. I stepped closer and aimed the flashlight. There was a wet line running down the side of the wrap. It started about halfway up the cabinet and ran straight down to the pallet base, maybe an inch wide, glistening under the flashlight beam, but it wasn't wet anymore. It was freezing as I watched it, the moisture turning to ice in ridges that layered over each other like candle wax. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds, trying to figure out what I was looking at. The cabinet was cold when they loaded it. Jasper said it had been climate controlled and would equalize, but it was 20 below outside. If it was warming up, it wouldn't be sweating. And if it was sweating, the moisture wouldn't freeze that fast, unless it was colder than 20 below. I didn't touch it, didn't get any closer. Just stood there with the flashlight on it and the work lights buzzing overhead and the gravel crunching under my boots every time I shifted my weight. The protocol sheet said to report anomalous behavior immediately. This probably counted. But my phone was dead and I didn't know who I'd call anyway. Raven wasn't answering. Jasper didn't give me a number. The delivery contact at Gakona wouldn't mean anything until I got there. I turned and walked back to the cab. The glove box had the usual stuff: registration, insurance card, a half-empty pack of gas station ibuprofen, 2 pens, and a small coil of braided copper cable with alligator clamps on both ends. I pulled the cable out and held it under the dome light. It looked like welding gear, heavy-gauge copper braid maybe 8 feet long, with spring-loaded clamps that had teeth designed to bite into metal. The copper was clean. No oxidation, no corrosion. It had been placed there recently. I turned it over in my hands and checked the clamps. They opened smooth and snapped shut tight. Then I remembered the protocol sheet and flipped it open again, running my finger down the lines until I found it. Protocol 5. If you experience persistent mechanical or electrical interference, ground the cargo container to the vehicle frame using the copper lead provided in the glove compartment. Attach one end to a bare metal surface on the truck frame and the other to the steel cage. Do not touch the container itself. Ground the cargo. That wasn't standard. I'd hauled plenty of freight that needed tie-downs or temperature monitoring or careful handling, but I'd never hauled anything that needed to be grounded like a live circuit. I looked at the copper cable again. This wasn't an afterthought. Somebody designed this. Somebody knew the cargo might do something that required containment, and they put a grounding strap in the glove box ahead of time and wrote it into the rules. Electricity, interference, grounding. I didn't know what was in that cabinet, but it wasn't just environmental monitoring equipment. I grabbed my flashlight, shoved the copper cable into my parka pocket, and got out of the cab. The flatbed was just over 4 feet off the ground. I grabbed the side rail and pulled myself up, boots scraping on the diamond plate until I got my knee over the edge and rolled onto the bed. The tapping stopped. It had been going again for the last 2 minutes. Quiet, barely audible over the engine, but steady. 3 hits, pause, 3 hits, pause. Now it cut out completely, and the silence that replaced it felt heavy. Wrong. I stayed crouched on the flatbed for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. Just the engine idling and the wind moving across the lot and the buzz of the work lights overhead. I stood up slowly and walked toward the pallet. The black plastic wrap was still bulging in the center. The frozen wet line was still there, ridged and layered. I didn't get close enough to touch it. I pulled the copper cable out of my pocket and uncoiled it, letting it hang loose in my hands. One end in my left hand, one end in my right. 8 feet between them. I turned toward the front of the flatbed and crouched down near the frame rail. The bed was aluminum, but the frame underneath was steel. I aimed my flashlight at the joint where the bed bolted to the frame and found a bare spot where the paint had worn off. Clean metal. Good contact point. I opened the alligator clamp and positioned it over the bare spot, then let it snap shut. The teeth bit into the steel and held tight. I gave it a tug. Didn't move. One end grounded. I turned back toward the pallet, letting the cable spool out behind me as I walked. The cage was steel, painted black, with horizontal bars spaced about 6 inches apart. I aimed the flashlight at the bars and stepped closer. There was frost on the metal, not everywhere, just certain spots. Small patches of white buildup clustered near the center of the cage, mostly on the bars closest to the cabinet. The pattern didn't look random. It looked like contact marks, like something inside had been pressing against the bars over and over in the same places. I heard footsteps on gravel. I turned and saw a guy walking toward the truck from the direction of the building. He was wearing doe-tee coveralls and a reflective parka, hands shoved in his pockets, knit cap pulled low. Maybe 30 years old. Narrow face, tired eyes, blonde hair sticking out under the cap. He stopped about 10 feet from the truck and called out, "Hey, you need something?" I didn't answer. I was holding the loose end of the copper cable in my right hand, the alligator clamp hanging open. The cabinet was 3 feet in front of me. The guy was 10 feet to my left. He took a step closer. "You okay?" I focused on the cage, found a bare spot where the paint had chipped off one of the horizontal bars, right near the center. I opened the clamp wider and moved it toward the bar. "Hey," the guy said again. "You hear me?" I pressed the clamp onto the bar and let it snap shut. The cabinet responded. I clamped the second alligator clip to the steel cage bar, and the cabinet hit the inside with one hard impact that rang through the whole flatbed. I almost went down, caught myself on the cage frame with my free hand. The cabinet slammed again from the inside, metal on metal, loud enough I felt it in my ribs. Manuel stopped walking, just froze mid-step about 20 feet out. Then he tilted his head, slow, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The cabinet went still. I stood there gripping the cage, breathing hard, watching Manuel. He didn't move for maybe 5 seconds, just stood with his head tilted and his hands still in his pockets. Then he started walking again, not toward the building, toward the passenger side of my truck. His gait was wrong, stiff, like his knees didn't bend right, like someone who'd never walked before trying to figure it out. I realized it then. Too late, but I got it. Grounding didn't protect the truck. It gave the cabinet a path, into the frame, out through the electrical system, out into anything close enough. Manuel kept coming, slow and steady and wrong. I grabbed the alligator clip on the cage and tore it off. The copper lead swung free and the cabinet slammed again, harder this time, and the black plastic wrap split right at the bulge. Thin black fluid pushed out through the tear. Not dripping, reaching. In strands that moved on their own, stretching toward the cage bars. Where it touched the steel, it turned white. Not frost. The metal itself whitened and crumbled, flaking off in patches. I didn't wait to see more. I jumped off the flatbed, hit the gravel hard, rolled my ankle a little but kept moving. I yanked open the cab door and climbed in, slammed it shut, turned the key. The engine was already running. I'd left it on. I eased the truck forward. Slow. Manuel was still coming toward the passenger side and I didn't want to hit him. He kept walking, didn't react to the truck moving. Just kept that stiff gait, arms at his sides now, head still tilted. I gave it a little more gas and swung wide to avoid him. He turned, followed the truck for 3 steps, 4 steps. Then his legs went out from under him and he collapsed onto the gravel. I checked the side mirror. Manuel's body was sinking, not settling, sinking into the gravel like the ground was water. A dark stain spread outward from where he'd fallen, wider than it should have been, moving in a way that looked deliberate, like something alive feeling its way across the lot. I didn't stop. Didn't slow down, just kept rolling through the access road back onto the highway and punched the throttle. The tapping started again from the trailer. Same 3-hit pattern. Faster now. I didn't look back. By Glen Allen, the sky was starting to lift. Not full morning yet, but that pale gray that comes before dawn in February. Enough light to see the road without headlights. I'd been driving for maybe an hour, maybe more. The clock on the dash kept jumping. 12:15, then 11:58, then 1:03, so I stopped checking it. The tapping had gone quiet around 20 minutes back. Just stopped mid-pattern and didn't start again. I turned onto the Richardson Highway heading south toward Gacona. The road was empty, no other vehicles, no lights except mine. Then I saw it, faint red pulsing on the horizon, like arcs, intermittent, flickering on and off in irregular rhythm. I knew what it was, or I knew where it was coming from. The HARP site was maybe 10 miles ahead. I kept driving. The gate was open when I got there, just wide open, no barrier arm, no guard in the shack. The small building next to the entrance had its door hanging half off the hinges and the windows were dark. Beyond the gate I could see the towers, 180 of them I'd heard once. Tall aluminum masts in a grid stretching back into the snow. Blue-white glow rolled between them. Not light exactly, more like visible force. It pulsed and rippled, snapping from tower to tower in jagged lines. I stopped the truck just outside the gate. I should have turned around, driven back to Glen Allen, called someone, done literally anything else. But I knew the shipment was meant for this place. The delivery sheet said HARP Research Station, Gacona. This was it, so I drove in. The access road was paved but covered in a thin layer of snow. My tires crunched over it. The glow between the towers got brighter as I got closer, casting hard shadows that moved wrong. A woman ran out from between 2 rows of towers, waving both arms over her head. I hit the brakes. She kept coming, signaling me to stop short. I did, kept the engine running. She came around to the driver's side and I rolled down the window. Cold air hit me hard. She was maybe 40, short. Black hair pulled back tight, coveralls and a utility jacket. Her face was sharp and focused and she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her left hand was burned black all the way to the wrist. The skin was cracked and peeling and I could see bone in a couple places. She didn't seem to notice. "You're the driver," she said. Not a question. "Yeah." "You have the container." "Yeah." "Get it off the truck. Now." Concrete pad, 30 feet ahead on your left. I looked past her, saw the pad. Big square of poured concrete, maybe 10 feet across, sitting in the snow between two tower rows. The cabinet pounded from inside the trailer. 1 hit, 2, 3. The woman, Aria, I figured from the contact sheet, didn't flinch. Cage is bowing, I said. I know. Move. I put the truck in gear and rolled forward to the pad, angling the flatbed so the pallet was lined up. I climbed out, went around back, and started unhooking the chains. The black plastic wrap was split wide now. The black fluid had spread across half the pallet, eating through the steel cage in patches. The bars were bowed outward in the center, bent almost to breaking. I got the last chain off and grabbed the pallet jack handle, pulled it toward the edge of the flatbed. The glow between the towers snapped toward the cabinet, all at once, like it had been waiting. I shoved the pallet off the flatbed onto the concrete pad. It hit hard and the cage split open on one side. The cabinet fell through, landed on its side, and the door broke off. Something rose out of it. I can't describe what it was. My eyes wouldn't hold it. Every time I tried to look directly at it, my vision slid off to the side like trying to focus on something in a dream. It had shape. I know that much. Tall. Maybe 8 feet. Maybe more. It moved, but not the way things move. Then it spoke. Maddie. My mother's voice. Same cadence. Same tone. Maddie, I'm cold. I took a step toward it. Couldn't help it. My legs just moved. Aria grabbed my arm and yanked me back hard. Don't, she said. The glow between the towers pulsed brighter, snapping in tighter arcs toward the thing on the pad. It didn't react, just kept rising, spreading, reaching. The array can pin it, Aria said. Long enough for shutdown. But I need you in the control building. Red door, north side. Hit the emergency shutoff. Big yellow lever. You'll know it. What happens if I don't? It keeps spreading. The thing on the pad turned toward us. I still couldn't see it clearly, but I felt it looking. Maddie, come here. I ran. The control building was a low prefab structure with a red door on the north side, just like she said. I hit it full speed, shoved it open, stumbled inside. Rows of equipment racks, monitors, cables everywhere. And in the center, a big yellow lever mounted on the wall with a clear plastic cover over it. I flipped the cover up and pulled the lever down. Everything went dark. Not just the building, the whole site. The glow between the towers cut out instantly, and the hum I hadn't noticed until then stopped all at once. I ran back outside. The thing was still on the pad, but it was collapsing, folding in on itself. The blue-white arcs were gone, but I could see it clearly now in the pale dawn light, and I wished I couldn't. It slammed back into the cabinet. Hard. The whole pad cracked. Then the towers started failing. Not falling. Failing. Like something was eating them from the base up. The aluminum went dark, then buckled, then collapsed in sections. Black fluid streaked across the snow toward the tower bases. Same stuff from the cabinet, moving fast. I didn't wait to see what it did when it got there. I sprinted back to the truck, climbed in, slammed the door, and punched the throttle. The tires spun in the snow, caught, and I fishtailed through the gate onto the access road. Behind me, the towers were crashing, one after another in a chain reaction. The sound was enormous. Metal screaming and snapping and hitting frozen ground. I kept the gas down and didn't look back until I hit the Richardson Highway. By then the site was half a mile behind me and I couldn't see it anymore through the trees. 2 weeks later, Linden Transport terminated my contract. No explanation. Just a form letter saying my services were no longer required, effective immediately, with a final check for hours worked mailed to my Anchorage address. The check arrived 3 days after that. Correct amount. No note. I cashed it and didn't ask questions. The news ran a story about a fire destroying an abandoned research facility near Gakona. Electrical malfunction, they said. No injuries reported. The site had been decommissioned years ago, and the fire was contained to the property. I saw it on the TV at a bar in Wasilla, watched the whole segment. They showed aerial footage of the tower field. Every mast down. Black scorch marks across the snow in lines that didn't look random. A dot bulletin went out a week later listing Manuel Peters as missing. Last seen at the Paxson maintenance area on February 25th. Anyone with information should contact Alaska State Troopers. I didn't contact anyone. I kept the rules page. It's in my wallet now, folded twice. The paper's starting to wear at the creases, but I can still read it. Protocol sheet. 8 numbered items, printed on ConocoPhillips letterhead. It was the only accurate briefing I ever got for that job. I don't drive contract anymore. Took a warehouse position in Anchorage. Steady hours, no overnight runs. But I still follow the protocols. Every quiet radio channel is a reason to turn it off for 10 minutes. Every lone pedestrian on an Alaskan road is a reason to keep driving. I don't stop. I don't slow down. I don't look twice. That's it. That's the rule.